America is in shambles.
And how the federal government is handling migration. People are out here with hammers, baseball bats, whatever weapon they can find.
Preventing certain groups from executing acts of violence and repeatedly blaming the, quote, radical left.
Breaking news just moments ago, President Trump sending troops to Portland. Now, I remember this well. I remember 2020. There's a lot of violence in Portland. There was a courthouse that folks tried to set on fire, and President Trump deployed federal law enforcement there. I was his press secretary at the time.
The United States, what used to be a symbol of unity, the word was literally in the name. But in this modern day and age, it seems like the country is more divided than it has ever been. I mean, look at the divisive rhetoric that is ever present in our country today and in culture in general. And I'm not just talking about one political party or the other. Both parties are equally awful when it comes to degrading and just throwing insults at one another. Even some calling for the elimination of all those who disagree with you. I mean, just look at recent history. There were 2 attempts on Donald Trump's life during his campaign. Minnesota Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband were both shot and killed. And on that same day, another Minnesota senator, John Hoffman, and his wife were also shot. Thankfully, though, they survived. And Charlie Kirk's assassination, where there was literally leftist rhetoric carved into the casings that were left behind. And again, the individual who took aim at the ICE facility, sending rounds into the building. And unfortunately, 2 detainees were struck in the crossfire and were killed, with again, more leftist rhetoric carved into the casings. And unfortunately, as it seems to be the case with most things nowadays, the news media continues to use all of these events to try and push blame every which way, except to the people who are actually responsible. But in order for them to do that, they would actually have to look in the mirror, and it's safe to assume that none of them actually want to do that. Now, there's an entire conversation there to be had about the fall of journalistic integrity and that journalism isn't at all what it used to be and what it used to stand for, but that's a video for another day. But what I will say is there are people out there who believe that people who are losing their jobs over what they are saying about these events, it's violating their First Amendment right. People like Jimmy Kimmel, for example. There's a lot of people who are saying, well, you know, he was temporarily taken off the air and that was a violation of his First Amendment right because he was just saying his opinion.
Some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
Now, what I will say to this is yes, he had the First Amendment right to say the things that he did, to make the horrible joke that he attempted to make. But just because he had the right to do something doesn't mean that it didn't come with its own consequences. And when you work for a private business, they can decide at any point to fire you for anything. And a lot of the people that are claiming that what happened to Jimmy Kimmel is a violation of his First Amendment right, I've heard more than once, which is hearing it once would be mind-blowing enough, but hearing it more than once is just ridiculous, that what happened to Jimmy Kimmel is a worse atrocity than what happened to Charlie Kirk. The guy who lost his life trying to have a conversation. Let that sink in. Also, if you hold that opinion that what happened to Charlie Kirk isn't as bad as what is happening to Jimmy Kimmel, go put your phone down, go touch grass, do something else that isn't on the internet, because someone getting fired for saying something is worse than someone actually dying. Literally the worst thing you can do to somebody. And the events that happened on September 10th are the direct result of the villainization and this rhetoric that gets thrown around about our fellow citizens, about our neighbors, about our friends. And to be honest, the country as a whole has been heading this way for a very, very long time. The core values that this country used to stand for, a symbol of freedom, hope, and of a brighter future, have been slowly eroded away for a long time now. And we have been pitted against each other for so long that it doesn't really seem like there is a way to come back to true unity. But again, this fall doesn't really surprise me. And in my opinion, it is the result of the systematic elimination from God from our culture, our society, and our government. Now, I can already hear you typing, but before you comment about the separation of church and state, that was never meant to keep God out of the government. It was meant to keep the government out of the church. Because look at the settlers of this country and look at the governing body that they came from. The church was controlled by the government, and that made it a problem for anybody to have any sort of dissenting views. So when the settlers came here and eventually established a government, they didn't want to have that same problem here in the United States. So they set up the separation of church and state to keep the government out of church, but not church out of the government. But that concept has been twisted and manipulated into what we see now. It's almost as if there's an enemy that's actively trying to kill, steal, and destroy and tear down one of the largest Christian nations on the planet. And I mean, think about it though. When was the last time that this nation truly felt united about anything? Most would answer the 80s. What's happened since then? The systematic removal of God from our culture, the dismantling of the nuclear family, and the increased mockery of Christianity. Which honestly, again, that last one doesn't surprise me. Jesus said they will hate us just like they hated him. So at this point, I guess we're doing something right. A little bit of a sidestep. There is a modern day belief that religion is the cause of all of the strife around the world. And to that I say, if you think that the world without the westernized Christian nations would look better and more united than the bleak reality we live in, it's actually the exact opposite. If we didn't have the westernized pillars of Christianity like the United States and to an extent the UK and all of the other nations, the world would be a dark and more twisted place, and that is saying something. So what does this mean for the future of the country? Well, the only answer is obviously for everybody to come together, put their differences aside, and sing Kumbaya, right? Well, as much as I would love to say that's the answer, there isn't really an answer. The world is super divided, and it's only getting crazier by the day. But there are encouraging signs. There is a worldwide revival happening right now. People in droves are coming out and getting saved and radically encountering God on a scale that honestly I don't think I've ever seen in my lifetime, and that I've only ever heard stories about. And if it keeps on pace like this wave of revival is going to be like nothing that we have ever seen before. And to that I say, bring it on.